life insurers put life into the things you live for. The new factory that's hiring your neighbors. Maintenance on the bridge that keeps traffic flowing. The paycheck that puts pizza night on the table. Life insurers contribute $8 trillion to communities and local economies through bond purchases and other investments, and protect the financial security of 90 million American families, like yours. See how life insurers put life into America at acli.com. Paid for by the American Council of Life Insurers.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can finish the bachelor's degree you started in 19 months and under $19,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC and other affiliated stations throughout the country. Thanks so much for joining on this Saturday afternoon. My next guest is a guy I've admired for many, many years, as I know most of you listening to the show have. Jonathan Turley is one of the top legal minds in the country. He is one of the great defenders of the First Amendment and the most important part of our Constitution, which is the right to free speech, and has a wonderful book that came out. I think it's been out about a year from now. It's become a big mega bestseller called The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in an Age of Rage. You see him all the time, obviously, on Fox News. He's a Fox News contributor. So, Jonathan, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thank you for having me, Steve. It's a mutual admiration society, so thank you so much.
Well, I'm the economist and you're the lawyer, so this is going to be interesting. You're going to have to teach me some legal theory here because I don't understand the law always. But let's just start with your book, The Indispensable Right to Free Speech. As just a pedestrian in this, I just have found it kind of remarkable that mostly people on the left, but some people on the right, have so disparaged the right to free speech. They believe that, if I were to offend you, that somehow that's speech that can be outlawed or condemned. And I'm just surprised that the old civil libertarian left is the one that has really made aggressive attacks on free speech.
No, you're absolutely correct. I share your surprise, and it's unfortunately the reality that the greatest threats to free speech today are coming from the left. And this anti-free speech movement in the United States really came from higher education and has metastasized throughout the country, where students are being taught that free speech is a threat, that it's harmful, that it has to be controlled. When my book, The Indispensable Right, came out, there were 4 books that came out that were anti-free speech, including one where a Michigan law professor said that free speech is the Achilles heel of the United States. One of my colleagues has a book out which he calls... Say
that again.
This is a Michigan law professor who says that free speech is the Achilles heel. And you also have one of my colleagues is leading a movement to amend the First Amendment because she says that it's aggressively individualistic and free speech should be balanced against equity.
Right. And so this is basically they like to use the word hate speech. I hadn't heard that term until, 5 or 6 years ago, but now I hear that term a lot. I don't even know what they mean by that. That's something they don't agree with?
Well, this is with disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, and hate speech. There are all these different rationales for silencing other people. But that's one of the reasons the subtitle on Indispensable Right is An Age of Rage, because this isn't our first. We've been through these ages in which we turn on each other and try to silence each other. Mm-hmm. And many of the terms we use are the same. And so these are the same voices we've heard throughout history to justify silencing others. And we've been able to go through these cycles, but it's a dangerous pretense, a dangerous assumption that we're going to get through this one. We've never faced the anti-free speech movement we're facing now. I just got back not long ago from Berlin, where I spoke at the World Forum. I was one of 2 free speech figures. And, this was a group of EU officials and others who were red hot after Vance's speech in Munich, in which he denounced Europe over free speech. And it was the most anti-free speech gathering I've ever seen. And so, they are committed to fighting free speech.
This is in Germany.
It's the EU. The EU is trying to use its Digital Services Act to force people like Elon Musk to censor Americans. And there are Americans encouraging them to do that, including Hillary Clinton.
So Peggy Noonan, who I always read her column. I don't always agree with it, but I know Peggy, and I've always find her columns fascinating. And she had a column, 6 months ago or so, that she always writes lines that always stick out to me. And she said, somehow in America, these young Americans have come up with this idea that you have the right not to be offended. And I thought that's a really, you know what, Jonathan, I have the right to offend you, don't I?
Yes, and it's a shame because these students are learning in an environment very different from the one that you and I attended in college. I went to the University of Chicago, and it was an awakening for me. I mean, when I went to that campus, it was like walking into the bar scene in Star Wars. It was like I had never seen any people like this before. I was living in a cooperative, and downstairs, the Spartacus League, Trotskyites were meeting. Upstairs, we had militant vegans. Next door, we had crazy libertarians. And I loved every minute of it because I was fascinated by people who could see what I was seeing and come to different conclusions. Students today just don't have that. They're taught that free speech is harmful, that you shouldn't be triggered. And they have purged from faculties, conservatives, libertarians. At places like Harvard, less than 3% of the faculty are now Republican.
So whatever happened, I think it was Clarence Thomas who, in one of these cases a number of years ago, recited the old saw, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me.
Life insurers put life into the things you live for. The new factory that's hiring your neighbors. Maintenance on the bridge that keeps traffic flowing. The paycheck that puts pizza night on the table. Life insurers contribute $8 trillion to communities and local economies through bond purchases and other investments, and protect the financial security of 90 million American families, like yours. See how life insurers put life into America at acli.com. Paid for by the American Council of Life Insurers.
This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Spotify.
Yeah, and that is lost today because you see the response of students today that they truly believe that they should not be triggered by the views of others. Yeah, but there is an interesting thing happening, and I raised this in Berlin when one of the officials at Ireland confronted me, and I said, you know what? You guys just tried to pass the most draconian anti-free speech law in your history, and you were stopped, but they were stopped by young people in Ireland. And I think that what the left is reeling from is that younger people are beginning to step forward and say, actually, you know what? We want free speech.
The younger people said that.
Yeah, and you're beginning to see that. So
That's
have
good.
a lot of kids in college who unfortunately have been warped in their views, but there's also an element in these younger generations that are saying, actually, we sort of like this thing.
Mm-hmm. So there's a reason. I'm not the student of the Constitution as you are, but there's a reason that this was the First Amendment, right? These were regarded as the most important rights, and I just find it just bewildering and depressing that, for example, the old even the American Civil Liberties Union isn't really that good on free speech anymore.
No, it's not, and your point is a good one. One of the things I mentioned in the book is that the most revolutionary act of the American Revolution that was embodied in the First Amendment. I mean, that no country in history had ever put words like that on paper. But the thing that people have to remember is none of that came from Great Britain. Many of the things in the Constitution actually did come from Great Britain in one form or another, but not free speech. The British have never and still don't protect free speech the way we do. And so at the time, it almost sprang from the head of Zeus. The framers believed that free speech was a natural right. And this is something that gets me in trouble with a lot of law professors today who don't believe in natural law. But they believed that free speech was a gift from God, that free speech belongs to human beings so they could be fully human. And that's what was so revolutionary. So
I want to make one more question, ask you one more question about this. Then I do want to ask you about the Supreme Court case this week. Again, you're the student of the Constitution, but I seem to recall that, when the free speech First Amendment was debated, one of the reasons that the founders thought it was such an important inclusion of our Constitution was precisely to protect speech that might offend another person and to make sure that people could have free expression.
That's right. You don't need a First Amendment to protect popular speech.
Right, exactly. Right.
And, they wanted to protect dissenters. They wanted to protect people that couldn't speak otherwise. And that's what was so revolutionary. And obviously it's revolutionary today because you have all these people, including the EU, trying to roll back on free speech. Well, thank you for writing this book. It's called The Indispensable Right, and it's about the First Amendment. And I wish every high school and college student would read that book. Now, can I switch gears with you for our last few remaining minutes? You and I were talking offline a little bit earlier this week about the big Supreme Court case this week with respect to Trump and tariffs. I'm not a big tariff guy. I love this president and so much for what he wants to do, but I was a little queasy about the idea of the government, this president or any president having a kind of unregulated authority to impose tariffs, and tariffs are taxes. And so explain to me where you stand on this and what's going on with this, because I know our listeners are confused. First, the court came out and said, Trump cannot impose these tariffs, and then there was a stay. And so what's the state of affairs, and where do you fall on this one? Well, I'm not a big fan of tariffs. Milton Friedman sort of ruined me at the University of Chicago. But me too. The fact is the lower court decision by the International Court of Trade is a good faith decision. It's well reasoned. You can disagree with it, but I expect that many judges will agree with it. IEPA, the underlying law, does not mention tariffs. It's never been used for tariffs. It's designed for an emergency. And what the administration is basically saying is that the entire economy is an emergency. And that's not going to go over well with a lot of conservative judges and justices. They may have a real hard time, in my view. So can I just interrupt you for 1 second on this? Because you're making a very important point here, Jonathan. And by the way, my guest is Jonathan Turley of George Washington Law School and one of the great defenders of our freedoms and liberties. But the whole issue here really is one of, to me, almost like a checks and balances of our, that the president, and by the way, this would apply to any Democrat. If Kamala Harris was president or, Bill Clinton or Joe Biden, if they tried to raise taxes without congressional approval, I think a lot of conservatives would be howling in protest. And so I think we need to be fair-minded in terms of it doesn't really matter who the president is. It's really the principle at stake here. That's exactly right. And this interpretation of the statute runs against the grain. And I think that they could very well lose in front of the Supreme Court, which is why in my column this weekend I said, they need to look at a dual track here. The president does have authority to issue tariffs. He did that in his first term successfully. It's under laws like the Trade Act. And these are laws that are very deferential to the president. What the administration wanted, and I get this, is that they saw IEEPA as a way of doing a very fast and sweeping attack on tariffs. I get that. It was a 3-point shot. Right. It just bounced off the rim. And so what you need is to make sure that you proceed under the successful avenue you did before, but also Congress needs to look at this because regardless how you feel about tariffs, the president is closing in on what looked like very favorable trade agreements with other countries. Right. And so even if you oppose tariffs, this is not the time to pull the rug from under him.
I agree.
Congress needs to find a way to convey to these countries, you've got the president's back. You better negotiate because we'll work out the authority lines here. Yes. But he's got authority.
I think, Jonathan, you've nailed it, my friend. We just have 1 minute left, so I wanted to ask you, can you kind of forecast for us, do you think this will go up to the Supreme Court? And how do you think that the court would rule on this? I mean, as you just said earlier, it's interesting because some of the more conservative justices, they're kind of considered the originalists who look at the text of the Constitution, and they would seem to be the ones who would be most likely to, strike down the president's power to do this. So how do you see it playing out?
I think that if they succeed, it would be a Burma shave at best. I think that I would, if I was forced to put money on this, I'd have to bet against the administration because you're going to have justices there who have long interpreted statutes in this way narrowly. Keep in mind, the Constitution itself gives the authority over tariffs to Congress. So there's the center of gravity here is in Article 1. Not Article 2. Yes. And so all of those things are going to work against the administration if they go in front of the Supreme Court.
But, and just to end this then, I think you made the key point here, which is that Congress has to step up and make this declaration. And we'd be curious to how many Democrats might side with Trump and say, look, he needs this authority to be able to negotiate good deals with China and the UK and now the European Union. And that may be the way out, right?
I think so. And the president's right about the need to renegotiate. We need a shock therapy. Right. It's just that right now it's more shock than therapy, but we need these agreements to come down, and Congress can do that. And by the way, the Democrats have got to be careful because the Republicans could break this up and move tariff bills on particular countries like China. And then for Democrats in Michigan and other states to vote against those tariffs that are supported by unions is going to be a big ticket problem for them looking at midterms next year.
Great point. Well, Jonathan Turley, you are a national asset. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your weekend to join us on the More Money Show. And folks, we will be right back.
Life insurers put life into the things you live for. The new factory that's hiring your neighbors. Maintenance on the bridge that keeps traffic flowing. The paycheck that puts pizza night on the table. Life insurers contribute $8 trillion to communities and local economies through bond purchases and other investments, and protect the financial security of 90 million American families, like yours. See how life insurers put life into America at acli.com. Paid for by the American Council of Life Insurers.